I was made a judge in an Islamic court at a very young age, and I sentenced many Christians to different kinds of penalties. I literally determined whether Christians would live another day or not. Imagine such power in the hands of a boy trained to hate Christians. Please join the community of believers by sharing your prayers, locations, and thoughts in the comments section, using it as a system of mutual support. My name is Amir, and I want to tell you about something that changed my life forever. I grew up in Kabul, Afghanistan, in a neighborhood where important government people lived. Our house had high walls and a big metal gate. My father was Judge Khalid Rahman, one of the most respected judges in the Islamic court. Everyone knew his name. When we walked through the market, people would step aside and greet him with fear in their eyes. I was 12 years old when my father started taking me to court with him. He said it was time for me to learn what it meant to serve God and protect our faith. At first, I felt nervous sitting in that big courtroom with its stone walls and heavy wooden chairs. But my father told me that a man must be strong and never show weakness. He said mercy was for the weak, and justice was for the brave. The courtroom was always cold, even in summer. There were no windows, just one small opening near the ceiling where a little bit of light came through. My father sat behind a tall desk made of dark wood. I sat beside him on a smaller chair. In front of us, there were rows of benches where people waited for their cases. Guards with rifles stood by the doors. Everything smelled like old paper and fear. Every morning before court, my father and I would pray together. He taught me that we were doing holy work. He said that people who left Islam or followed other religions were dangerous and had to be stopped. I believed everything he told me because he was my father and everyone said he was wise and good. I remember the first time I watched him sentence someone. It was a Christian man named Abbas who had been caught teaching the Bible to children in his home. The man stood in chains with his head down. My father read the charges and then pronounced the sentence without even looking up from his papers. 20 years in prison. The man's wife screamed from the back of the room. I felt something uncomfortable in my stomach, but when I looked at my father, his face was calm and sure. He told me later that feeling sorry was a trick from Satan to make us weak. After that first day, I went to court with my father almost every week. I started to learn the process. I learned how to read the charge papers. I learned which crimes got which punishments. I learned that Christians were considered some of the worst criminals because they had rejected Islam and were trying to spread lies. My father explained that we had to be harsh with them to protect other Muslims from being confused. Sometimes the cases were quick. A person would be brought in, my father would read the charges, and within minutes, he would announce the sentence. Prison, beating, sometimes death. I watched my father sign execution orders with the same hand he used to pat my head at home. He never hesitated. He never showed doubt. I thought that was what strength looked like. At home, my mother cooked and cleaned and never asked about the court. My two younger sisters played with their dolls and studied their lessons. We lived like a normal family. We ate rice and lamb together. We laughed at my uncle's jokes when he visited. My father told stories about his childhood. But nobody ever talked about what happened in the courtroom. It was like we had two different lives, one at home and one at the court, and they never touched each other. My father had a special leather notebook where he wrote down every case. Sometimes at night, I would see him sitting at his desk under the lamplight, writing in that notebook. I asked him once what he was writing, and he said he was keeping a record for God to see on Judgment Day. He said God would reward him for every Christian he had stopped. I wanted God to be proud of me too, so I started paying closer attention in court, learning faster, trying to be just like my father. When I turned 13, my father gave me my own notebook. He said it was time for me to start keeping records too. He told me that one day I would be a judge like him, and I needed to learn how to think like one. Every time we went to court, I would write down the names of the people, their crimes, and their sentences. My handwriting was messy at first, but my father said that did not matter as long as I remembered that each name represented someone who had tried to hurt Islam. He taught me to see these people not as humans with families, but as enemies of God who deserved punishment. My father began asking me questions about the cases. After someone was sentenced, he would turn to me and ask what I thought the right punishment should have been. At first, I was always too gentle. When a Christian woman was brought in for owning a Bible, I suggested 5 years in prison. My father shook his head and said that was too soft. He gave her 15 years instead, and then explained to me that we could not show any weakness or mercy because it would encourage others to break the law. He said our job was to make examples of people so that others would be too afraid to follow Jesus. Slowly, I started thinking the way he wanted me to think. I started suggesting harsher punishments. When I got them right, my father would smile at me with pride. After about 6 months of watching and learning, my father let me read the charges out loud in court for the first time. My voice shook as I stood up and read from the paper about a man who had been baptizing people in secret. The courtroom was completely silent except for my voice. When I finished reading, my father announced the sentence as death by hanging, and the man began to cry. I sat back down feeling strange, like I had just done something I could not take back. But my father put his hand on my shoulder and whispered that I had done well, that I was becoming a man, that God was pleased with me. That night at dinner, he told my mother and sisters that I was growing into a strong servant of God. I felt proud, but I also felt something else that I did not have words for, something heavy that sat in my chest and would not go away. By the time I was 14, I had watched my father sentence more than 100 Christians. Some went to prison for many years. Some were sentenced to public beating with wooden rods. Some were sentenced to death. The death sentences were carried out in different ways depending on what my father decided. Some people were hanged in the prison yard where nobody could see. Some were killed by the sword in front of crowds as a warning. Some disappeared in what the papers called accidents, but everyone knew they were planned killings made to look like car crashes or house fires. My father explained that different methods sent different messages to the community. I started to become numb to the crying and begging. When families would scream in the courtroom, I learned to block out the sound. When mothers would throw themselves on the floor pleading for their children, I learned to look away. My father taught me that emotions were tools that Satan used to make us doubt God's justice. He said that if we listened to our hearts instead of the law, we would fail in our duty. So I built a wall inside myself. I stopped feeling sorry for the people who stood before us. I stopped seeing them as real people with real lives. They became just names in my notebook, just problems to solve, just enemies to remove. My father started giving me more responsibilities. He let me help decide which punishment fit which crime. He let me suggest whether someone should go to a normal prison or a high-security one. He even let me write some of the official documents that would be signed and sent to the authorities. I felt important and powerful. At school, other boys knew who my father was and they treated me with respect and fear. Teachers never questioned me. I could do almost anything I wanted because everyone knew I was the son of Judge Khalid Rahman. But at night, I started having dreams. In these dreams, I would see the faces of the people we had sentenced. They would look at me with sad eyes, but they would not speak. Sometimes I would dream about a young Christian man we had sentenced to death by sword. In the dream, he would stand in front of me and blood would pour from his neck, but he would keep looking at me with peaceful eyes that made me feel terrible inside. I would wake up sweating and afraid. I never told my father about these dreams because I knew he would say they were attacks from Satan trying to make me weak. Everything changed in the summer when I was 15 years old. A case came to our court that was different from anything we had seen before. The police had raided a secret Christian gathering in an old warehouse on the edge of the city. They arrested 24 children, all between the ages of 8 and 16. These children had been attending secret Bible classes and had declared themselves as followers of Jesus. Some of them had Christian parents who were already in prison. Some had converted without their parents knowing. The government wanted to make a big example out of this case because they said it showed that Christianity was spreading like a disease among the youth. My father studied the case files for many days. He told me this was a very important case and that we had to handle it carefully. The plan was simple but cruel. We would hold a public trial where all 24 children would be forced to stand together. My father would give them one chance to reject Jesus and declare themselves Muslim again. Those who agreed would be sent to government schools where they would be watched closely and re-educated. Those who refused would be sent to high-security prisons for at least 20 years each, and some might be sentenced to death depending on their age and how stubborn they were. My father said this trial would be filmed and shown on television as a warning to all families in Afghanistan. The trial was scheduled for a Tuesday morning, 3 days away. My father asked me to help him prepare the documents. We worked together at his desk at home, writing out the charges and preparing 2 sets of papers, one for those who would agree to become Muslim again and one for those who would refuse. As we worked, my father talked about how this case would be remembered, how people would speak about it for years, how it would make parents too scared to let their children hear about Jesus. He was excited and proud. But I felt something very different growing inside me. For the first time in 3 years of watching these trials, I felt afraid of what we were about to do. These were not adults who had made their choices. These were children, some of them younger than me, and we were about to destroy their lives. But I said nothing because I did not want my father to think I was weak. On Monday night, the evening before the trial, I went to bed early because my father said we needed to be rested and sharp for the important day ahead. I lay in my bed in the dark, listening to the sounds of the city outside my window. I could hear dogs barking in the distance and cars driving past our house. I tried to sleep, but my mind kept showing me images of those 24 children standing in the courtroom. I had seen their photographs in the case files. Some of them had faces that still looked like babies. I wondered what they were thinking in their cells tonight. I wondered if they were scared. Finally, after many hours of tossing and turning, I fell into a deep sleep. What happened next is hard to explain, but I will try my best. I found myself in a dream, but it was not like normal dreams. Everything felt more real than real life. I was standing in a bright place that was so full of light I could barely see at first. Then my eyes adjusted and I saw a figure standing in front of me. He was tall and dressed in white clothing that seemed to glow. His face was kind but also powerful in a way that made me want to fall down. I knew immediately that this was not a normal person. This was an angel, a messenger from God. My whole body began to shake with fear. The angel did not speak with a mouth like we do, but somehow I could hear his words inside my mind and heart. He revealed to me that what my father and I were planning to do to those children was a great evil. He told me that God was not pleased with the work we had been doing in that courtroom. He let me know that every person we had condemned was precious to God, that Jesus had died for them, and that we had been fighting against heaven itself without knowing it. The angel showed me visions that I will never forget. I saw Jesus hanging on a cross, dying for the very people my father and I had been punishing. I saw those 24 children, but in the vision they were surrounded by light and Jesus was standing with them, holding them close like a shepherd holds his lambs. Then the angel told me that I had a choice to make. He revealed to me that if I went through with the trial tomorrow and helped force those children to deny Jesus, I would be sealing my own fate and walking further into darkness. But he let me know that if I refused to participate, if I spoke the truth and protected those children, God would protect me even though I would face terrible consequences. The angel told me that Jesus was calling me, that everything I had been taught was wrong, and that real truth was found in love, not in punishment and fear. Then suddenly I woke up in my bed, gasping for air, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would break through my chest. It was still dark outside, maybe 3 or 4 in the morning, and I was covered in sweat and shaking all over. I could not go back to sleep after that vision. I sat up in my bed with my knees pulled to my chest, trying to understand what had just happened to me. Was it really an angel or was it just a strange dream? But I knew deep in my heart that it was real. It was more real than anything I had ever experienced. The words the angel spoke were still echoing in my mind. I thought about all the people we had sentenced over the years. I thought about their faces and their tears and the way some of them had looked at us with forgiveness even as we destroyed their lives. For the first time, I let myself truly see what we had been doing. We had not been serving God. We had been serving fear and hatred and pride. My whole body felt sick. When the sun came up, my mother called me for breakfast. I went to the table, but I could not eat. My father noticed and asked if I was feeling well. I told him my stomach hurt, which was true, but not in the way he thought. He told me not to worry, that the trial today would be simple and quick, and that by afternoon we would have dealt with those children and could rest. Every word he said made me feel worse. I looked at my father across the table, this man I had loved and respected and tried to be like for my whole life, and I realized that he was living in darkness and did not even know it. I wanted to tell him about the angel, about what I had seen, but I knew he would never believe me. He would say it was Satan trying to trick me. So I stayed quiet and pushed my food around on my plate while my heart broke into pieces. We arrived at the courthouse at 9 in the morning. The building was surrounded by police and cameras because this was going to be a big public event. Inside, the courtroom was packed with government officials, religious leaders, and reporters. The 24 children were brought in by guards. They looked so small and frightened in their prison clothes. Some of the younger ones were crying. Others stood with their heads up, trying to be brave. They were lined up in 2 rows in front of my father's desk. I sat in my usual chair beside him, but everything felt different now. My father opened the case file and began to read the charges in a loud voice so everyone could hear. He explained that these children had betrayed Islam and followed a false religion, but that in his mercy, he was giving them one chance to return to the truth. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to sit on them so no one would see. I knew I had to do something, but I did not know what. I was just a boy. How could I stand against my father and all these powerful people? My father finished reading the charges and then he turned to me. In front of all those people, in front of the cameras and the officials and the religious leaders, he told me that today I would have the honor of helping with the sentencing. He said it was time for me to take my place as a future judge of the Islamic court. He handed me a document and told me to read it out loud. It was the paper that gave the children their choice, to either accept Islam again or face severe punishment. My hands were shaking as I took the paper. Everyone in the courtroom was watching me. The children were watching me. I looked down at the words on the page and they seemed to blur together. I could feel my father's proud eyes on me. I could feel the weight of everyone's expectations. Then I remembered the angel's words. I remembered the vision of Jesus with those children. I remembered how the angel had revealed to me that this was evil, that God was not pleased, that I had a choice to make. Something broke open inside my chest. Before I could stop myself, before I could think about what would happen, I put the paper down on the desk. My voice came out smaller than I wanted, but it came out. I said I could not do this. The courtroom went completely silent. My father stared at me like I had just stabbed him. He asked me what I was talking about. I stood up, my legs shaking so hard I almost fell, and I said that what we were doing was wrong. I said these were children and we had no right to force them to believe something they did not believe. I said that punishing people for following Jesus was not justice. The room exploded with noise. Officials began shouting. My father's face turned red and then white. He grabbed my arm so hard it hurt and tried to pull me back into my chair. But I kept talking. I said that an angel had come to me in the night and revealed the truth to me. I said that Jesus was real and that he loved these children. I said that I was done helping to hurt people for believing in him. I did not even fully understand what I was saying at the time. The words were just pouring out of me like water from a broken dam. Guards rushed forward and grabbed me. My father was yelling that I had gone crazy, that I was under some kind of evil spell. The last thing I saw before they dragged me out of the courtroom was the faces of those 24 children, and some of them were looking at me with tears running down their cheeks, not tears of sadness but tears of something else, something that looked almost like hope. They threw me into a cell in the basement of the courthouse. It was dark and cold and smelled like urine and mold. I sat on the floor with my back against the stone wall and I cried harder than I had ever cried in my life. I was terrified of what would happen to me. I knew my father would never forgive me. I knew I had humiliated him in front of everyone. I knew the government would punish me for what I had said. But even though I was scared, I also felt something I had never felt before. I felt clean inside, like a heavy weight had been lifted off my chest. For 3 years I had helped destroy people's lives, and now finally I had done one thing right. I had protected those children, or at least I had tried to. I did not know if it would make any difference, but I knew that the angel had been right. I had made the choice that God wanted me to make. Hours passed in that dark cell. I could hear footsteps and voices above me, but nobody came to get me. I prayed for the first time in my life in a way that was real and honest. I did not pray the formal prayers my father had taught me. Instead, I just talked to God like He was there with me in that cell. I told Him I was sorry for everything I had done. I told Him I did not fully understand who Jesus was, but that I wanted to know. I asked Him to help those children and to help me. And as I prayed, I felt that same presence I had felt in the vision with the angel. It was warm and peaceful and loving. I knew that Jesus was real and that He was with me even in that terrible place. I knew that my life would never be the same, but I also knew that this was the beginning of something true and good, even if it cost me everything. Late that night, the cell door opened and my uncle came in with 2 guards. My uncle was my father's brother and also worked in the government. His face was hard and angry. He told me that I had brought shame on our entire family. He let me know that my father was so humiliated that he could not even look at me. He revealed to me that the trial had continued without me, and that my father had sentenced all 24 children to long prison terms because none of them would deny Jesus after seeing what I had done. My uncle said it was my fault that those children would suffer, that if I had just kept quiet and followed the plan, some of them might have been released. His words felt like knives cutting into me. But then he told me something else. He said that because I was young and because my father had some influence, they were not going to execute me or put me in prison for life. Instead, they were sending me away to a strict religious school in the mountains where I would be re-educated and taught to forget these dangerous ideas. He said if I ever spoke about Jesus again or caused any more trouble, they would kill me and no one would ask questions. Then the guards took me out of that cell, put me in a truck, and drove me away into the darkness while my uncle watched without any expression on his face. The religious school in the mountains was more like a prison than a school. We woke up before sunrise every day and prayed and studied the Quran for hours. The teachers were harsh men who hit us with sticks if we made mistakes or showed any weakness. They knew why I was there, and they watched me constantly to make sure I was not spreading my dangerous ideas to the other boys. I kept my head down and did everything they told me to do. I prayed when they said to pray. I memorized the verses they gave me. I acted like I had learned my lesson and returned to being a good Muslim. But inside my heart, everything had changed. Late at night when everyone was sleeping, I would pray quietly to Jesus. I would ask Him to help me understand the truth. I would beg Him to protect those 24 children and to somehow let me know that what I had done was right. After 6 months at that school, something unexpected happened. A new student arrived, a boy about my age named Hamid. He had also been sent there for punishment, but I did not know why at first. We became friends because we were both outsiders and the other boys avoided us. One night, Hamid whispered to me in the dark that he had been caught with the Bible. He told me he was a secret follower of Jesus and that his family had hidden their faith for years until they were discovered. When I heard this, my heart almost exploded with joy and relief. I told him about the angel and the vision and the trial with the children. I told him everything. Hamid cried and hugged me and said that God had brought us together. From that night on, we helped each other survive. Hamid taught me about Jesus from memory because we had no Bible. He told me about the Gospels and the miracles and the resurrection. He explained that Jesus did not come to bring more rules and punishment, but to bring love and forgiveness and freedom. Everything Hamid taught me made sense in a way that nothing else ever had. I finally understood why those Christians I had watched in the courtroom had such peace even when they were sentenced to terrible things. They knew Jesus, and knowing him was worth more than comfort or safety or even life itself. After 2 years in that mountain school, when I was 17 years old, I was finally released. The teachers told my father I had been reformed and could return home. But I was not the same person who had left. I had secretly given my life to Jesus, and I carried him in my heart like a hidden treasure. When I returned to Kabul, my father barely spoke to me. He had aged terribly in those 2 years, his hair had turned gray and his face was full of lines. He told me I had destroyed his reputation and that I would never be allowed near the courthouse again. My mother hugged me and cried, but she did not ask about what I believed because she was too afraid to know. My sisters looked at me like I was a stranger. I got a simple job working in a shop that sold vegetables, and I kept my faith completely secret. But I found ways to connect with other underground Christians, including Hamid, who had also been released. We met in secret places and prayed together and studied the Bible that someone had smuggled into the country. We lived in constant danger, but we also lived with joy because we had found the truth, and the truth had set us free in ways that no one could take away from us, no matter what they did to our bodies. Now I am 23 years old and I live in a different country where I am safe and free to follow Jesus openly. I got out of Afghanistan with help from other believers who risked their lives to save mine. My father died 2 years ago without ever forgiving me, and that pain still lives in my heart. My mother and sisters are still in Kabul and I cannot contact them because it would put them in danger. I do not know what happened to those 24 children, but I pray for them every single day. I pray that somehow my small act of speaking up for them made a difference. I pray that they know Jesus is with them wherever they are. I work now helping other refugees who escape from dangerous places, and I tell my story to anyone who will listen because I want people to know that Jesus is real and that he changes everything. I want to tell you, my brother or sister in Christ, that following Jesus is the most important decision you will ever make, but it is not always easy. Some of you live in places where believing in Jesus is dangerous. Some of you have families who do not understand. Some of you feel alone and scared. But I promise you that Jesus is worth everything. He is worth more than safety, more than comfort, more than the approval of other people. When that angel came to me and showed me the truth, my whole life fell apart, but it also came together in a way that finally made sense. Do not be afraid to stand for Jesus even when it costs you something. Do not be silent when you see others being hurt for their faith. Speak up with love and courage, and trust that God will be with you just like he was with me in that dark cell and in that mountain school and in every hard moment since then.